Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be looking at answering 8 markers in the GCSE questions for Unit 1 and Unit 2. Now the 8 markers come at the end of each topic and they can be just 8 marks or they can be 8 marks plus 4 marks for SPAG. So we'll have a little look at that at the end as well. But I just want to run you through a really basic way to make sure that you get as many of those 8 marks as you possibly can. So the very first thing I would say for you to do is when you get to the 8 marker at the end of each topic is to take your pen and to write all over the question. And I want you to really break the question down, and I've said here rewrite it in plain English. I need you to look at the command word, to define the command word. I need you to look at the next part of the question, which will be what you need to answer. So rewrite that in English so you know exactly what's been asked of you. And then finally have a look at either the scale or the place that it wants you to look at, whether it's looking for a developed, a developing or an emerging country. And we'll look at that a little bit more at the end. But you have to know right at the start what you're answering, otherwise you'll end up answering it wrong. You'll end up writing about an emerging country instead of a developed country or vice versa, and then you'll get no marks. So the best thing to do is to rewrite that question in English, kind of like plain English, not in geographical terms, and try and understand what that question's asking you. If that takes you a couple of minutes, then all the better really, because it will save you time because you'll kind of know exactly what you need to do. So that's number one, that's the most important thing. Secondly, you need to look at the command words. Now the command word for the 8 markers are either going to be assess or evaluate. There's really nothing else that you can be asked generally anyway. So assess, because we've talked about this before, assess means weigh up. So assess means weigh up the pros and cons of whatever you've been asked about, or the advantages and disadvantages, or the pros and cons, or what's good and what's bad about the question that it's asking you. So when you get an assess question, you're looking at one paragraph being for and one paragraph being against, or one paragraph being the advantages, the other one being the disadvantages. The next command word that you can get is evaluate. Now evaluate and assess I think are very similar, but with evaluate you have to look at all the elements and you have to come up with a judgment. So in your final paragraph you'll come up with a judgment as to which of those areas, which of those factors for or against is the most important according to the question. So I would suggest anyway, and I've said this before, that for assess, even at the end, you come up with kind of some kind of very short conclusion to say which of the factors you feel has the most impact on whatever it's asking you about in the question. So the main body will be 2 paragraphs really. Paragraph 1 will be looking at the pros or the advantages or the positives, whatever it's asking you about. So assess the impacts of top-down schemes in an emerging country. So you're looking at Vision Mumbai, for example, in paper 1, and you're looking at the pros, the advantages of Vision Mumbai, how it's good. The second paragraph, you're looking at the cons, so you're looking at the opposite because it asks you to weigh up. So you're looking at the cons or the disadvantages or the negatives about that, and you're telling the examiner your facts, few facts and figures, etc. But what you're really doing is you're evaluating the scheme or the strategy or whatever it is. Now, to help you out all the time, it's really important that if you're stuck or you're thinking I can't think of anything else to say, always in geography, think about social being to do with people. So how does the scheme or the strategy have a positive or negative impact on the people? How does that scheme or strategy have a positive or negative impact on the economy? So that's about money, isn't it? And finally, how does that scheme or project have an advantage or disadvantage on the environment? Now the environment, be careful with that because it doesn't always mean like trees and grass and rivers. Environment is what is around us. So it will be kind of buildings and maybe pollution and air and land and that kind of thing. So there's lots and lots to write. So if I were you at the start of each of the questions, I would just make a little note at the top, social, environmental, economic at the top, so that you know if you get a little bit stuck that you can think, oh, I haven't said anything about the environment, so I'm going to say how it's good or bad for the environment, how it has a positive impact on air pollution, or has a negative impact on air pollution, how it has a positive impact on people, on social, on their quality of life, or on them themselves, etc. Or on the economy, how does it help the economy, how does it not help the economy, is it expensive, is it cheap? So that should get you through with enough points to answer an 8 marker. And then finally, I would always write a conclusion, even if it's just an assess question, which means like weigh up both sides. I'd say overall, this is what I think. There is no real right or wrong answer, because all of these strategies or things that you're going to be looking at in geography for your 8 markers, they've all got advantages and disadvantages, and there are arguments to say that one is better than the other, or even that you think that, because quite a few people ask me, well, can I say like it's a bit of both? And I would say yes, you can say we've got some advantages, but we've also got these disadvantages as well, and it's difficult to come to a conclusion, and you'll get those marks then as well. And especially if it is an evaluate question, you must always do that. So I just suggest it's good practice to have at the end of any of these to just, it's a little bit more evaluation anyway, and you will get the marks for it. So if you haven't quite evaluated in your first or your second paragraph, if you do a little conclusion and you're kind of weighing up and justifying your opinion there at the end, the examiner's going to be under no illusion that you know what you're talking about, and you'll get those marks. So that will be the overall conclusion, which is the most important, or which has the biggest impact, or which is the most influential. That's what I would say for that one. So let's just run through what types of countries you could be asked about. So if you're asked about a developed country, then really in Unit 1, we've looked at America and we've looked at the USA. Try not to talk about the UK because it's world geography, remember. But some of you might have looked at Japan, but I think most of the case studies are going to be for the USA. Secondly, with a developing country, remember that is Malawi, and that's the major one that we've looked at in this unit for a couple of the topics within Unit 1. And finally, again, a couple of the topics within Unit 1 are an emerging country, which is going to be India, but you may have looked at Brazil as well. And we've looked a little bit at Brazil with favelas, and we've looked at that in terms of self-help housing and things. But you may well be asked about one country, in which case don't get confused and don't start talking about both places. But just to recap, the most important thing I think is to break down the question, rewrite it, make sure you know what's happening, you know what you're being asked, look at the command word, main body 2 paragraphs, and then a final little conclusion. And try not to go over the amount of space that you've been given, because to be honest, you may well be waffling if that's the case, and then you just won't pick up the marks, because you'll just maybe be reiterating what you've already said, or writing it again or in a different way. So try and be quite succinct, and try to remember that it is just 2 paragraphs. It's only 8 marks, so really it's 2 points for, 2 points against, and then your conclusion. And as long as you've well developed those points and you're talking about the significance of them and really developing what the impact of those factors are, then you should be very, very close to getting 8 marks. But always, always, always break down the question so you know exactly what's being asked, and that will give you the best chance of getting those marks.